Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and participate in this interesting set of discussions. So I'm going to read my talk because it's very dense and I want to make sure I stay within the time limit. So in the late 1970s, a new urban ground floor typology emerged in Los Angeles, the mini mall. Like all new building types, it was a recognizable and replicable architectural response to specific real estate practices, commercial demands, and spatial opportunities. It offered an efficient structure for roadside retail development, catering to everyday needs and routines. The development of the mini mall was also shaped by two important geopolitical events: the 1973 oil crisis and the 1965 Immigration Act. First, what is a mini mall? Uh, Often confused with the linear strip mall or the pedestrianized shopping mall, the mini mall is a small shopping center with from 5 to 15 shops on an L-shaped lot with parking in front for easy access, usually located at a corner. The mini mall is not unique to Los Angeles, and you can now find them across the world. But from 1973 to 2000, developers built an estimated 3,000 of these convenience centers. Their proliferation led City Councilman Mike Wu to call Los Angeles the mini mall capital of the world. He did not intend that as a compliment. As observers from Rainer Banham to Doug Sussman have documented, the long boulevards that stretch across Los Angeles are a major structuring element in the city's urban morphology. In addition to carrying large traffic loads, these arterial streets form continuous commercial strips, a seemingly endless succession of 1 or 2 story storefronts punctuated by occasional high rises line these streets. In most places, the strip is only 1 building deep, surrounded on both sides by single family houses and small apartment buildings. Beginning in the 1920s, the city's urban form responded to the widespread adoption of the automobile. Its benign climate, scattered population, and the availability of affordable cars made Los Angeles the first city to automobilize. And I think you can see the successive decades of cars along these boulevards. Both cars and the extensive streetcar system encouraged dispersion across a large area. These conditions produced an urban landscape directed at cars and drivers. Whether applauded or deplored, Los Angeles became famous as the world's most car-centric city. Okay. However, in 1973 and 1974, the oil embargo challenged the primacy of the automobile. Many of you were not even born then, but the OPEC countries cut the production of oil and placed an embargo on oil exports to the United States after Richard Nixon requested $2.2 billion to support Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Although the embargo ended in January of 1974, the price of gas increased more than 350%, marking the end of cheap energy and plunging the US into an economic crisis. In Los Angeles, gas stations, already overbuilt in the 1950s and 60s, started to go out of business, and oil companies sold their abandoned sites. Wait a second, do I have this? No, okay. This situation provided the impetus for the invention of the mini mall. In 1973, driving through the San Fernando Valley, developers Marvin Levine and Alan Reisman spotted an empty gas station on this corner lot along a busy street. They quickly understood that they could build it would be perfect for a small neighborhood shopping center. Between the 1950s and 60s, between the 1960s and 80s, the number of service stations in Los Angeles dropped 46%. This made prime corner sites along busy boulevards available and affordable for redevelopment. Levine and Reisman created La Mancha Development, and in the beginning in the 1970s became the most active developers of mini malls, building over 1,400 of them. In their heyday in the 1980s, they built one a week. Oil companies contacted them when they had available sites. Mini malls were easy to develop, requiring no changes in zoning, minimal architectural and engineering services, and could be built with inexpensive Type 5 wood frame and cinder block construction. The La Mancha developers were unaware that the mini mall type had actually emerged in Los Angeles 50 years earlier for many of the same reasons. In the 1920s, they evolved into small shopping centers in the 1930s. These early mini malls were emblematic of the city's mobile lifestyles. This new retail type appealed even to local modernists like Richard Neutra. Frank Lloyd Wright knew about them from his time in Los Angeles and reinvented them in Broadacre City as the great roadside market. In 1930s, the drive-in markets evolved into small neighborhood shopping centers that became symbols of good planning. Planners demonstrated how they could fit into any corner, and influential planners such as Catherine Bauer and Clarence Stein praised them as alternatives to the chaotic disorder of the roadside strip. However, post-war retailing rendered them obsolete, replaced by chain supermarkets and later the shopping mall. The reappearance of drive-in markets in the 1970s and here's the image for the gas crisis on the right, and also a very unusual situation in Los Angeles that is unique now, but was really very typical in the 1960s, is the 4 gas station on every corner phenomenon, okay? But this is the only one apparently that is left, and now replaced by 4 mini malls on every corner. Okay, the reappearance of drive-in markets in the 1970s and the subsequent construction of thousands of them was also closely connected with another geopolitical development, the impact of the 1965 Immigration Act on Los Angeles. Changes in US immigration policies replaced European immigrants with people from around the world. Preferences given to skills and family relationships opened the gates to immigrants from Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East. Los Angeles's booming economy attracted so many of them. One scholar called the city America's Ellis Island. Immigration transformed the ethnic and racial makeup of the region, making it one of the most diverse in the nation, and Los Angeles one of the first majority-minority cities. By 1990, 40% of the population was born outside of the United States. Many of these newcomers had skills and savings, but language problems and lack of American work experience were obstacles to employment. By necessity, they became self-employed, starting their own small businesses, a condition economists call hyper-entrepreneurship. In Los Angeles, immigrants constituted an unusually large percentage of business owners and an even larger percentage of so-called Main Street businesses, neighborhood shops and services like convenience stores, dry cleaners, and laundromats. Others occupied ethnic niches. In LA, Cambodians dominate the donut shop industry and Vietnamese nail salons. Still others provided specialized ethnic goods and services or introduced new products like boba. Many of these new business owners located in mini malls, drawn by low rents and locations all over the city. Developers work closely with immigrant tenants to identify opportunities for ethnic merchandise and services. La Mancha even sought out successful tenants, encouraging them to open branches in their latest mini malls. Their support generated local ethnic fast food chains, including New Meiji, Beef Bowl, Yoshinoya, and El Pollo Loco. All of these began as single restaurants in La Mancha malls. Mini malls also attracted existing chains and franchises. The profusion of locations allowed businesses like Starbucks to use market research to open enough new branches to saturate the region. Okay, this is the mini mall formula. Cheap sites, cheap construction equal cheap rents plus convenience, and that's the mini mall. This formula encouraged the proliferation of mini malls. Like most building types, they're highly standardized, but have considerable room for variation. The standard mini mall had a flat roof and stucco finish. This basic format could be altered with red tile or, in Korean neighborhoods, blue tile roofs. Possible placements and configurations. Any number of decorative embellishments could be added, such as mansards, postmodern triangles, arches, canopies, crenellated parapets, awnings, and towers. Material choices often depended on the neighborhood. As alternatives to stucco, walls could also be faced with tile, brick veneer, or in wealthy areas, marble. Two-story malls were larger and more expensive, requiring steel frames, staircases, or elevators. On occasion, the mini mall could even be adapted to a mid-block site using a U configuration. The sign was a key element in their design. It needed to quickly identify individual stores and restaurants and be visible to passing motorists. In a city with many similar mini malls, the sign conveyed their unique qualities. By 2000, there were an estimated 3,000 mini malls. They served both passing drivers and neighborhood shoppers. Their main attraction was convenience. The public found them easily accessible for everyday shopping, allowing them to get in and out quickly, avoiding long supermarket lines or distant mall parking. Developers pointed out that there would not be so many of them if they didn't satisfy so many consumers' needs. As their signs suggest, each mini mall's retail mixture reflected the needs of their customers, a heterogeneous assemblage of shops and services with mom and pop stores, ethnic businesses, franchises, and chains. Their signs acted as an index of their location, spelling out their ethnic, class, and cultural identities, stand-ins for the actual populations and communities inhabiting the neighborhood. Almost as soon as they appeared, critics began to attack mini malls, identifying a range of problems: litter, loitering, too much parking, too little parking, too many curb cuts, noise, poor maintenance, and traffic congestion. However, most attacks focused on aesthetics, typically the ambiguous crime of visual blight. They used words such as stark, bleak, charmless, unpleasant, generic, cheap looking, and most often ugly to describe them. In 1989, 10% of respondents to an LA Times quality of life poll cited mini malls as their biggest pet peeve. Architects and planners were early and vociferous opponents. The AIA began a campaign alerting the public to their aesthetic and design flaws. The mini mall party, with its empty corner, violated a fundamental tenet of urban design to emphasize the corner. Curb cuts and parking lot were seen to discourage the public life of the sidewalk that they aspired to. To offer innovative alternatives, they organized a competition entitled Real Problems, the Convenience Center. However, none of their entries ever got built. By the late 1980s, mini malls had become a political issue in the city. City officials and planners attempted to control what had previously been unregulated. They proposed a host of new regulations intended to curb their continued growth. A succession of city council people denounced them, asking voters to implement new restrictions. An initiative passed limiting the amount of all commercial development with mini malls as collateral damage. This was followed by a halt on mini mall construction in Hollywood. And in 1988, the city council established strict new guidelines. Subsequent regulations required street frontages with parking behind and 1 tree for every 4 parking spaces. Wealthy smaller cities such as Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, San Marino, and West Hollywood followed with mini mall moratoriums or outright bans. In retrospect, their alarm seems exaggerated. In many respects, the mini mall was an early response to the city's increasing density. Their concentrated form accommodated more businesses than the commercial strips that were earlier along streets and did not require street parking. The gas stations that preceded them had been even worse in terms of pedestrian access, curb cuts, and aesthetics. Perhaps the sheer numbers and ubiquity of mini malls was overwhelming. To many Angelenos, their rapid and apparently uncontrolled growth across the urban landscape was disturbing, giving rise to the derogatory name pod malls, which portrays them as alien invaders taking over the city. Admittedly, many were very basic, but even as the LA Times architecture critic noted the increasing number of well-designed mini malls, the restrictions against them continued to grow. Much of the dislike of mini malls reflected changes in Los Angeles' self-image and physical spaces. Critics on both the right and the left went beyond aesthetics. Mike Davis singled out mini malls as evidence of a degraded public realm. To others, the wildly eclectic selection of tenants, reflected often in signs without English translations, seemed emblematic of a city that Philip Reeve called capital of the third world. More significantly, the city's increasing density renewed longstanding demands that Los Angeles be more like other cities, with more high-rises, mixed use, and better public transportation. Civic leaders, planners, and architects, influenced by the postmodern urban design movements of the 1980s, such as the New Urbanism, reimagined the city following traditional urban models with pedestrianized streets, imposing facades, the antithesis of the low-rise, auto-oriented mini mall. These new urban aesthetics and values portrayed mini malls as a past incarnation of the city that needed to be eliminated. But and this is actually the improved mini mall, according to regulations. This is the only one that I can find that was actually ever built, but I think you can see that it completely eliminates the advantages of the mini mall. And that's probably why this is the only one that was ever built. The signs are illegible. It's not clear where you're supposed to park. And actually these architectural details are very confusing. But during the 1980s, here, let's just go back. Okay, these are the new values before mini mall, after. I think you can see new design values, mixed use, street walls, form-based codes, European ideas of vibrant pedestrian life and sociability. So this is what people wanted in Los Angeles after this, and more recently, empty storefronts. But during the 1990s, the mini malls also found defenders. Jonathan Gold, the city's legendary Pulitzer Prize-winning food writer, alerted Angelenos to the wealth of ethnic cuisines that could be discovered in mini malls. As adventurous eaters followed his advice, this solidified the mini mall's position as a location for the best ethnic cuisines in the city, often hidden in the corners with the cheapest rent. After this, even fine dining restaurants such as the Michelin-starred Trois Mec moved into mini malls. Catherine Opie, the well-known photographer, elevated the type with her mini mall series. now in museums around the world. Using a custom-made panoramic camera that captured their horizontal orientation, Opie shot her deadpan white and black images at dawn without cars or customers, giving the mini malls an unexpected dignity. Her large format camera captured details like their signs, leading Opie to declare, "The mini malls are the essence of place, the new town center that shows the multicultural aspect of the city." By 2000, no new mini malls appeared. Although increasing restrictions made cost higher and diminished profits, the real problem was that Los Angeles had run out of affordable corner lots. So developers turned their attention to more promising regions in Texas and elsewhere. Even so, mini malls continue to survive and even thrive. In suburban locations, such as the predominantly Asian San Gabriel Valley, no longer limited to former gas station sites, the type took on a life of its own. On mid-block sites, the basic mini mall morphed into the maxi mall. Taiwanese and mainland Chinese developers, not bound by local conventions, supersized them and filled them with booming Asian businesses, even one attached to a Hilton hotel. And this continues to be the main form of development in the eastern San Gabriel Valley as development moves outward from the city. One imaginative developer even built low-income housing in the parking lot of a mini mall, leaving the mini mall and actually parking. So it's not necessarily either or. Sorry, wait a second. Okay. To people who grew up in the 1980s, mini malls are now objects of nostalgia, the place they could walk to in the neighborhood or where they had their first job. This is reflected in the many posts, images, and discussions about mini malls that can be found on social media. On a personal note, I have warm memories of the mini mall near my house, which perfectly served the complex needs of my Hollywood neighborhood. There was the Starbucks where moms from the local preschool hung out after dropping off their kids, the sushi bar whose takeout fed both locals and passing commuters, and the convenience store where I bought the orange Milano cookies that got me through my dissertation, and where a neighbor told me you could buy cocaine at the pizza concession. Finally, in spite of the city's new self-image, new regulations, and improved public transportation, the reality remains that many people still drive cars, and much of the population has a mini mall within walking distances. Even today, it would be hard to find an Angelino who hasn't visited one. The search for real estate profits that created the mini mall inadvertently reveals important urban dynamics rarely considered in discussions of the urban ground floor. The often overlooked economic and social importance of cheap space, the benefits of immigrant entrepreneurship, the implications of debates over urban aesthetics as vehicles for elites to assert their dominance, and finally, the surprising ability of generic building types to take on personal and cultural significance. Thank you. Okay, Anastasia.
Margaret, thank you so much for this fascinating and very accurate account of mini malls. 2 questions. Do you know how they are faring now? My guess is, and that's only a guess, that they're doing better because of their hyper-local elements, because that's what you find, as you say, your dry cleaners or your ice cream store than some of the other retail. But I'm wondering if you have any data on that. And the second, and that's more of an observation, is that you mentioned that the sites started disappearing, and we know about the issues of affordability in Los Angeles. But Los Angeles is in the front of another trend, and that's the electric cars. I mean, many more electric cars now in Los Angeles than in many other parts of the US, and which would make the gas station even more obsolete. eventually. So I'm wondering if you are predicting a new, you know, a new life for new mini malls as the gas stations start disappearing.
Well, I think that's a good question. It depends probably on the size of the site. Some of these gas station sites are actually huge, and they're going to be housing. There will be a competition between housing, but certainly could have there's so many restrictions about building mini malls now. I think it's going to be a little more difficult than the early versions where you could just do it really fast. But that's a great question.
I can just say that, yeah, the stats on the closure of gas stations, it's been going down as fuel economy, you know, as miles per gallon the cars can drive. They've been dying for their now.
Yeah, it's actually hard to find a gas station in central Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
What about how they're faring in terms of retail? Any of the two of you happen to know?
I didn't hear that. What?
How, so the trend is a lot of retail stores have closed down because of COVID and because of the new trends, but my guess is that maybe they're faring better in mini malls because of hyper-local.
They are faring better. The kind of empty storefronts, you really do not see them in mini malls because, you know, I mean, there are a lot of reasons. I think you could even say, you know, family ownership, kind of the margin of profitability is much different. And also they're just small. People started walking to them in COVID. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, yes.
Thank you, Margaret. Really wonderful presentation of work. It's a good cautionary tale because we're actually looking at some of this typology within New York City, particularly Staten Island, and just like this desire to kind of want to have street walk. So I really thank you for kind of bringing up some good thoughts for that. And also being able to like blur your aesthetic, you know, judgment that I think many urban designers should do. My question is around kind of, did you look at all about like kind of how these entrepreneurs had lease agreements? You know, oftentimes like, you know, I'm curious like what some of those structures look like if they're shorter in term, and that's why it allowed, you know, not just all the other reasons that you mentioned that as being really great for businesses, but just like understanding the intricacies about like the leases that they sign and how long those.
You know, that is a great question that I don't know the answer to. And I think it depends. You know, some mini mall developers then also manage their mini malls, others sell them. So far, there's no condo mini malls, but like in Canada, which has also led to a lot of immigrant entrepreneurship. But I really don't know the answer to that.
Pattern, at least in Atlanta, of second generation immigrants are more often buying, they're buying them. And
Yeah.
so then you're getting the immigrants.
Thank you.
First of all, it was a wonderful history of the mini mall. And it strikes me, just in looking at what you've shown, that their origin is really basically in a defect in LA, which made it very, very difficult to get commercial uses, get various rezoned for commercial. All those sites, obvious place to put and they have only two ethos. One is to put as much stuff on the ground. Second, the benefits are clear. I mean, the immigrants afford these and they couldn't afford other kinds of. But you know, in portraying this, my impression is that you're saying, let's just let it rip. You know, whatever seems to work economically. Should there be no social policy about what should happen?
Well, what do you mean exactly? Social policy?
Is there anything that zoning should require of them other than parking and space?
Like,
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well, I would say that actually they're pretty much regulated now, so you cannot do this anymore within the city of Los Angeles and other nearby cities. So, I mean, I don't understand social policy in retail space. because I'm not familiar with any kind of social policy that takes over that governs other kinds of retail spaces.
Well, they're trying. Well, most of the early ones, I think some later ones had 3 or 5 foot sidewalks. So you get out of your car, cross the sidewalk, walk, drop, etc. Many of these are becoming actually important ethnic gathering places. Should one regulate the relationship between cars and shops so that there isn't that space for people to socialize?
Well, you know, actually, a lot of mini malls have tables and chairs outside. And it's very easy to take a single parking space and make it into a kind of parklet. So I think that in a way, more than even public streets, the mini mall has a lot of advantages for this. Because of the incredible regulation wars, I wouldn't actually want to get into additional regulation. But I think that certainly mini malls are even moving in that direction. A lot of them you can sit outside. I mean, the benign weather of the city makes that very possible. And so just as a kind of business practice, many malls have started doing that. Yeah.
One last question, then we have to move on.
Okay, Kian.
Can we follow on Gary's comment? So there is an incredible social life. I would not discount the fact that these are in some ways some of the centers of social life in LA. Like, you go to like Sawtell and it's a series of mini malls, super walkable, the most vibrant like young street life that you'll see in West LA. Like what else might we look for?
Yeah, I was actually waiting for the question about that. And one of the critiques of the mini mall, which was undesirables hanging around. And so maybe desirables also hanging around. Usually there's a line of, when you go to a popular ethnic restaurant, there's going to be a line outside. So there is a lot of people and things going on there. So, and I would actually be against regulating that even more. Because they're already so regulated that they don't even exist. Yeah.
That's the social
Okay.
policy. Thank you.
Okay.